Yep.
Yep. Okay, so this is a meeting of the Charter Review Commission Subcommittee on Ranked Choice Voting, and I'm going to call this meeting to order. I apologize for being late for anybody that may be calling in. So, Jim, I'm having a meeting.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, so I'll call the meeting to order. Dog, I'm having a meeting. And there's your kitty. But so I'll call that to meeting. So I've got Commissioner Vendetti here with me, Commissioner Gasquet, and Lisa Arlett Aero from Fairvote, Washington, to just kind of help us with some questions that we have today as well. We are waiting on a couple of commissioners, so I'm going to take care of some kind of minor business in the beginning here and some updates. I did a couple of significant updates. Well, first of all, I would like to read into the record a public comment that we got at that was sent to the Columbian, and it was a letter to the editor, and so I'll read it. It's really short, but I just want to make sure everybody hears it. I commend Clark County Charter Review Commission Subcommittee on the Ranked Choice Voting for their efforts to make our county elections better, faster, and cheaper. Since this subcommittee was formed earlier this year, they have worked diligently to learn from election advocacy groups, scholars, and other municipalities that use ranked choice. In the meetings I've attended, they've seen evidence this type of voting is election reform that is proven to increase competition, ensure majority winners, and save taxpayer dollars. Elements that have been missing from our elections for far too long. As our charter review subcommittee continues to explore more about how ranked choice voting can benefit our county, I encourage Clark County voters to support their work our commissioners are doing by educating themselves on ranked choice voting. You might just be surprised at how easy, secure, and fair elections can be. And that was submitted by, let me see if I can find her name, Brenda Norton, Vancouver. And I just want to thank her for that comment and for the support in the work we're doing. Thank you. So, since we're going to still kind of try to wait just a little bit for Commissioner Harless, I'm going to just give some updates here. We are waiting. Ballot language is being put together right now. It's being put together by an attorney. His name is Dave O'Brien, and he works for Represent Us, and he's worked for other advocacy country as well. And he's very familiar with ranked choice voting, and he's putting together for us different options, and so that's why it's taking maybe just a little bit longer. He said he would have something for us this week, and I did talk to him today on the phone, and he was on the subway, and he said, I will have something for you this week, so I'll be sending it out to the subcommittee members as soon as he sends it to me. Because of the different options that we are going to be exploring, like how, using ranked choice voting to choose the top two in the primary, for our partisan races, and then we also have the ranked choice voting option for nonpartisan races. So he's putting those. So it's quite a bit of work he's doing. He's putting those ballot measures together. So I send them right to you when I get them. I did reach out. I don't know if anybody's aware, but here, let me find it. The Julie Weiss of the King County Elections has put together a informational workshops for all the auditors and their office, which is for around ranked choice voting, which I think is really good. They're interested in learning how to make it work, and how it works, and so I was really encouraged by that. I sent Greg a letter. Those workshops are on, and some of these things he had questions for us around when he came to talk to us as well. And on the September 28th, they're doing a ranked choice voting ballot design workshop. On the September 30th, they're doing a ballot tabulation workshop. And on October 1st, they're doing an elections officials workshop. So I sent him an email today and I said, oh, of course I would love to go and attend that. It is just, it is right now just for auditors and auditors staff. But it also, it seems like the Secretary of State is giving, her people in her office like credit for using it. So that's a good thing that she's recognizing that is education that's valuable to them. So I was really encouraged by that. I did also tell him that that it'd be great to talk to him after the workshops because it would help guide our work, right? If we see what their ideas about what it should look like here and how that would work. So that's one of the those are a couple of the things that I wanted to talk about as far as just updates. I have our intern went back to school. She helped me with a little work and it was real, she really enjoyed it. She was a political science major and she helped me with a little work on some FAQs, which I'm still kind of tweaking to send out around that as well. So we do have after this meeting, and when we get the ballot together, we will have to start thinking about putting in an explanatory statement together and all of that, all that other kind of stuff that goes with it. But I don't know. Kim had to leave at 5:30 anyway, so I'm going to go ahead and have Lisa talk about the reason that it's different. It's different when you're choosing two candidates, like how you run ranked choice voting. So she's going to explain it a little bit, and I'll just turn it over and let Lisa explain it. I can try, but I think it's better coming from her.
Thank you, Commissioner Niles, for inviting me. Appreciate the opportunity to speak with all of you and continue to support your good work. We, typically, I think you all know that ranked choice voting has this wonderful efficiency to be able to combine primaries and generals into a single round of voting, which in most cases, in most jurisdictions around the country, is the way that they're choosing to go. But there are times when it makes sense to have a primary, and in that case, using the primary ranked choice voting in the primary is a great use of it because those are large fields. And we know the state of Maine and the state of Alaska in their implementations, they retain a primary. So the fact that you all are looking to, at least create one of the options for the charter amendments that you're going to be able to consider would retain a top two primary. So this is what I'm here to talk about, just like, well, so what are the nuts and bolts of how that would work? Using ranked choice voting in the primary to pick two winners who then will go to the general election. And of course, in a general election, when there's only two candidates on the ballot, there's no need for ranked choice voting in that round. Voters can just pick one. So we're talking about what would it look like to use ranked choice voting to pick two winners. It's a little different from picking one winner. From the voter's perspective, I want to start by saying from the voter's perspective, it's identical. Voters will be offered, a chance to rank as many of the candidates as they wish, first choice, second choice, third choice, and so on. So voters' experience is identical. But from Auditor Kimsey's perspective, in order to pick two winners compared to one, there's a slight difference in how they're counted. And the ranked choice voting for picking two or more winners was the first reason that ranked choice voting was invented back in the middle of the 1800s, back in Denmark. It was invented in order to pick several candidates at once for like a city council and so on in the fairest possible way and with the fewest possible votes wasted. And that's what it does. And it was later adapted for just picking one winner. So any questions so far about what we're talking about? Just want to pause and make sure we have space.
So let's just, what she's talking about is single it's SVT. Is that what I'm
So
saying?
what we're going to talk about right now is there's ranked choice voting is kind of a big umbrella term that
Mhm.
encompasses basically two types of elections. What we're used to, where you just pick one winner, and we can call those single winner races. And that way of using ranked choice voting is also called instant runoff voting. IRV, instant runoff voting, is the same, ranked choice voting. But when ranked choice voting is used to pick more than one winner in a race, it's sometimes called multi-winner ranked choice voting, and it also has a technical name, single transferable vote, STV, as contrast to IRV, STV. Again, remember, for the voter's perspective, it's all the same. There's no difference. Totally simple. So Terry asked me, Commissioner Niles asked me to come and just be able to explain just on a high level quickly, how does the multi-winner way, the single transferable vote, STV, how does that work? And I'll just offer a quick explanation and I'll be glad to go into more detail with any of you. Also, I just want to point out there is a lot that you can find on the internet. If you're starting to want to hunt around and look around, I'd be happy to refer you to things that I think, might be most succinct and clear. Okay, let's just start with one overarching idea that's important to just grasp. We're so used to single winner races that we might not even question assumptions we bring. But one of them is, in a single winner race, we're going to just pick the mayor. In order to win, you have to have more than half the votes. The candidate who wins has to have more than half the votes. Well, that makes perfect sense with one winner. We're so used to that. But stop and think just for a minute, if there's a race that we're going to pick, say, 4 winners in one race. Well, if you just pause and think for a minute, each candidate really only needs to win about a 1/4 of the votes in the community in order to be elected. You don't need half the votes. You don't have four different candidates aren't going to get half the votes each. The threshold to win is lower when you're going to elect several candidates at once in one race. So if we're going to have, let's say, 5 winners in one race, again, it makes sense to think of each candidate needs to get support from about 1/5 of the community, right? So similarly, we see the first thing then to see is that when we're going to pick more than one winner, the threshold to win is a bit lower than what we're used to, lower than 50%. So how does a race work to pick more than one winner? Well, the first thing, we start just like usual. On election night, all the ballots are submitted. Auditor Kimsey and his staff will start by looking at all the first choice votes, just like usual. And if enough candidates, we're going to elect several winners at once in this race. If enough candidates get enough votes to win, that threshold, they exceed that threshold needed to win, then they'll be elected from those first choice votes, just like we're used to. If we fall short of electing as many winners as we want, just by looking at first choice votes, then in just the way you're used to, the candidate with the least support will be eliminated. Voters who voted for that candidate as their first pick will not have their votes wasted. Their votes will now count for their next choice, and all the ballots will be counted again in a second round to see if, we can get everybody, the number of winners that we want in that race. So all of that, I hope, should sound fairly familiar. Does that all seem clear enough?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, so the place that it's a little different with electing multiple winners is what happens if one candidate is excessively popular. So popular that, in fact, they get way more votes than they need to get elected. Now, stop and imagine for a minute that we're having an election for Charter Review Commission, and Commissioner Lasher is so popular in the community that pretty much everybody knows that he's going to get enough votes to be elected. we know that the threshold to win, if there are 5, 6 open seats, it's going to be somewhat lower threshold than 50%. And we know it's just common knowledge that he's going to have like 90% of the votes. He's going to have way more votes than he needs. So you can imagine that the voters might start thinking, well, I like Commissioner Lasher best. He's my first choice, but I don't want to waste my vote. I don't think he needs my vote to get elected. And I also like, Commissioner Gasquet. Sorry if I got your name pronounced wrong. She's my second choice. So maybe I should vote for her instead of Commissioner Lasher. So you can immediately imagine how voters would be all of a sudden caught up in strategic voting if we don't do something to correct for the excess votes, right? So in a multi-winner race, because that threshold is lower, we're going to be electing several candidates. We want to find a way to take care of excess votes in a way that's fair and that leads to not, the fewest possible wasted votes. And that's what the single transferable vote does. It transfers surplus votes for candidates to those voters' next choices. We're used to having votes transferred from the eliminated candidate, right? The eliminated candidate, if you voted for the eliminated candidate, your vote's going to go for your next choice. We're used to that way that IRV works. Well, STV comes in with this additional way of ensuring that voters are not wasting their votes by transferring surplus votes that a candidate gets in excess of the threshold to those voters' next choices also. It's kind of a high-level explanation of how that works.
That's a really great explanation. And the OPA site is really great because you can look at like all the places that use it, Minneapolis, and that use those kind of things that have these multi-candidate. And it really kind of brought it to me like, oh, well, that would like it's really a proportional way of making sure that we get proportional representation where when that happens, and makes total sense as far as being fair and the way to do a multi-candidate thing. And maybe you could kind of briefly explain, like, if you were to, is there another reason that if you were just to use it as we always do, like in the same manner,
Yeah.
where it would like not be very fair
If
to
we were to try using the instant runoff voting that we're familiar with, the one that's designed to pick one candidate, if we were to try to use that for picking two candidates, it's vulnerable to punishing the voters who like the popular candidate. Again, imagine the people who really like Commissioner Niles, but their second choice is Commissioner Gasquet. If they waste excessive votes on Commissioner Niles, then somebody else might get elected ahead of Commissioner Gasquet because those voters weren't able to express their true preferences because their votes got wasted on that most popular one. Does that help?
That does.
Yeah,
It makes total sense to me. Does anybody else have any questions about this way of doing our top two?
Yeah, so with that style, one of the things that pops to mind is, how do you determine which non-wasted votes get transferred to their second
Such
pick?
a good question. And that's in Cambridge, Massachusetts, that's been electing their city council like that since 1941. And in Ireland, which uses this method to choose their equivalent of city councils and so on, those ballots are, my understanding is, are still hand counted. And I do actually need to learn exactly how they decide. I think it's just coming in order, whichever, they get, Commissioner Lasher gets his enough votes to get elected, and then subsequent ballots that have his name first, those are going to be counted for those voters' next choices. And you can see right away, Commissioner Vendetti, that there's there's potential problems with that. And so, but the way it's done in the modern world is that votes in ballots, the number of ballots in excess of the number needed to win, those you determine. I'm not explaining this very clearly, but let's see. Let me try one more time. The excess votes are reallocated proportionately across all of the ballots for Commissioner Lasher. We would find out, like, if, for example, he had twice as many votes as he needed, then every voter who voted for him would have essentially they would give half a vote to him and then half a vote to their next choice. Let me say one more little, yeah, I can see you're thinking, good. And I've got a lovely little 2-minute
That's
video.
brilliant, though.
It is, yeah, it's
That's
quite
brilliant.
lovely.
That means everybody. Yeah. Yeah.
So there's a lovely little explanation that Minnesota Public Radio does with Post-it notes that shows how this works. And I can send that to Commissioner Niles when I'm done. But let me offer you one other little explanation that I love. Imagine that every voter gets $1 to spend to elect the candidates that they like best. Notice I said candidates, because this is getting a little bit in the weeds. If it takes $1 to get your first choice candidate elected, if your candidate needs your full vote to get elected, then that's where your dollar will go, to elect your first choice. But if your first choice is a very popular candidate and your first choice only needs 50 cents of that dollar to get elected, then you would really like to be able to spend your additional 50 cents on your second choice candidate. And that's what single transferable vote allows.
Great analogy. Money always perks my ears. Yeah, that's really great. Great analogy. So that's what we're dealing with, commissioners. Is if we're going to do a the top 2 primary, that will be in the ballot. And when I talked to David O'Brien, he said, yes, I'm putting that together. The nuts and bolts about how it's decided, just like Lisa said, everything to the voter is going to be exactly the same as it would be for any other ranked choice voting. As far as putting how that's happens, the second round, third round, those kind of things, if it comes down to that, would be something that Auditor Kimsey would manage. I do want to talk a little bit about, just because Lisa's here, because I know, and it's going to be interesting that Auditor Kimsey is going to this workshop, because they're going to talk about their equipment and making that happen and those kind of things. I did, because everyone's here, we had talked about like how many rankings we wanted to put in. We were thinking about allowing, and I know, when Kimsey was here, he's like 3 or 4. And then, I've had some other people suggest things. I do want to say that I think our equipment, and correct me if I'm wrong, Lisa, is our equipment that we use in Clark County, they do have the capability of ranking 6. Yeah. So that's something for us to think about between now and for all of you to think about.
Are you talking about the general or the primary?
The primary.
Primary. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So when we're thinking about, because that's something that we can put in our ballot measure, is like how many rankings that we would have. So if it's the Verde machine, is that what? Yeah.
It's Hart Intercivic Verity, I think, but yeah. HART is the vendor.
Yeah. They have the ability to do 6. And so think about that, you guys, when you're thinking about like where would want to sit on. And
Commissioner Niles, if I
yes,
may, I believe, and that this is, I may be speaking a little bit out of turn here, but I believe in Dave O'Brien would be a great person, the attorney who's working with you on this. There is a, there are sort of lumpers and splitters in the world, right? And there's the
uh-huh.
people who want to put more and more detail into things like charter amendments, and others who prefer to keep the charter amendment quite high level, and then have those details like how many rankings and so on outside of that amendment. And you all will have some choices to make on that, and following best practices in your county and advice of your attorney. But it wouldn't necessarily be necessary for you to specify the number of
Oh yeah,
rankings.
yeah. Yeah, I understand that too. And I talked to Dave about it a little bit. I do think that I need to talk more, and I probably will shoot Auditor Kimsey a little bit, because there's a little bit of question about, like, when you look at other municipalities that have done it, they have like rules for elections, and then they have like, San Francisco has it's in their charter. A lot of it's in their charter. Minneapolis, there's a rules for election. So I probably should reach out to Greg Kimsey and see what his capability, and Dave asked me to do that as well. So
May I add one more point?
no,
In the local options bill that we've been working to pass statewide, and we don't know what will happen this coming session, but one of the features of that bill is that it does direct the Secretary of State's office to convene a work group
okay,
that would determine rules under the Washington Administrative Code, under the WACS, that would determine all of these detailed rules. What do you do if a voter marks two different candidates both first choice? What do you do in case of a tie? All of these kinds of what ifs that need to be
right,
determined for any election system. And those exist now for the current election method. There, what do you do in case of a tie? Auditor Kimsey doesn't have to make these things up, right? He can go to the WACS and look at the rules, and there it is. And so, if we're able to pass statewide legislation that will then, determine these things at the level of the Secretary of State, then Auditor Kimsey would just, be able to turn to that. However, if Clark County ends up going first before there's any statewide enabling legislation, then it would be up to his office to determine those rules. But as you said, Commissioner Niles, at this stage, there are 50 some jurisdictions in the country that are already implementing ranked choice voting. And so it would be, and with the support of the Ranked Choice Voting Resource Center, which is available to work pro bono and support RCV implementation, it should not be too challenging for Auditor Kimsey to convene a group that would set those rules up.
right. And
And
so
you don't really need to do that in the charter.
right, okay. We will see what Dave comes up with. I'm really excited to look at the ballots. So I think that as far as everything else,
I have a question.
Yeah.
I have a question. Wouldn't a strategy, the voter, when they're thinking about that, I think they would like to pick 1, 2, 3, 4, or whatever the number is of their choices, but that's probably beyond all that they really care about. And the rest of it, I think in the details, yeah, you'll get people out there, especially the people who want to tear down and kibitz ranked choice voting, will throw out a lot of what ifs out there. And I think keeping it very simple is the main challenge right now, and keeping our wording. If we're going to make a proposal, we got to keep it fairly simple. The basics of what people think might be a better process, and so I would offer not to get involved with all the other options, and if the next charter review wants to get in more detail, that they can. But I think we need to crack the door open right now.
I agree about keeping it simple, but I want to stress that SVT is not ranked choice voting. So if we put ranked choice voting, I mean, that's what it is. It's just a way to do multi-race ranked choice voting. So we'll see what he comes back with. He's going to have multiple proposals for us, and then we can make a decision about that. But I agree with keeping it very simple. And I did talk to Dave about that, and that's what he agreed. He's, that's what he's going to be doing. So we'll see. He said he'd send them to me by the end of the week, and then I'll get them to you guys. And so, and when I'm looking here on our at our work plan, so October we have a first touch with the commission, and yours so after that we're going to continuing doing some ongoing FAQs. So and our first touch, because this month we were supposed to be working on a rough draft of ballot language based on some of the research and data we came back. So our proposal will have that rough draft. It won't be a finished product, but it will be a rough draft. And so I think we're on schedule as far as the work plan. So we will do the proposal and send that rough draft to the commissioners on October 6th. And then we'll go from there, and then we'll have the month of October to kind of really, dig into like ballot language and tweaking it, make sure we get, a legal review of everything, send it to Greg Kinsey, send it to, send what we're doing to Chris Cook, and do those kind of things to kind of make sure we have in November, we have a completed and ready to go ballot. Does that make sense to everyone? Yeah. Okay, cool. Okay, it's 5:40. Does anybody have any more questions while Lisa's here? She's a great resource. Oh, and I want to thank you, Lisa, for helping me so much,
Well, it's a
And
pleasure.
I think it's good to point out that Lisa's been a great help throughout our process in general. When we did the election for our replacement chair, I had the opportunity to talk to her and used some of her advice, which fortunately didn't have to use in ours, but it gave me a good place to start in case of contingencies on figuring out tie breaking and all of that. So she has been very useful throughout this year.
I know. We really
Great.
appreciate the work.
So thank you.
Well,
Yeah.
I'm well supported by a very large team of mostly volunteers. So,
Oh,
but
good.
it's been really fun to work with all of you. Thank you.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. Thank you very much. Okay, if people don't have anything else to add, I will go ahead. It's 5:50, now 10 minutes early. I'll go ahead and adjourn. And did Lisa, she was the host, wasn't she?
Looks like Doug has reclaimed it since he's back in.
Oh, Doug's reclaimed his host duty. Okay, so I'll go ahead and adjourn the meeting. Do you want to go ahead and stop the recording, Doug?
Sure.
Okay, awesome.